June 19 edition of PFT PM, and I've come up with a way to ensure that I don't sit here and ramble some more for a full hour. I'm starting at 11:24 a.m. Eastern on Wednesday, and at noon Eastern every Wednesday, as has been the case for longer than I can remember, I have an appearance on The Score in Chicago. So I have to be done then. I have to go then. I can only talk for 36, now 35 minutes. I got a few things I want to get to. Here are my notes. You see that they are very detailed. They are very detailed. There's a lot there. The script for this show is extremely ornate and complicated. I want to start with the efforts by Kansas to bogart the Chiefs from Missouri. This is a perfect situation for any team that is trying to get free money to build or renovate a stadium. You can threaten to leave without leaving. It's perfect. And I don't know whether the Chiefs engineered this. I don't think they did. I think they were hoping that Jackson County, Missouri voters would approve the measure that would have extended a sales tax, that would have renovated Arrowhead Stadium and paid for a new stadium for the Kansas City Royals, because you never heard any of the specific, we'll just go to Kansas before the vote. You heard, well, if this doesn't pass, we'll have to explore other options. But I think if they would have crystallized it as, we'll just go to Kansas, I don't know, maybe they thought that was a mistake because from the standpoint of the Jackson County, Missouri voters, well, the team's not moving away, so we don't care. Let Kansas pay for the damn stadium. We still have the Kansas City Chiefs, and we don't have to pay for the stadium. You know, it's one of the benefits of this setting where I'll speak extemporaneously and think out loud. I hadn't thought about that until just now. Maybe they didn't say, we'll just go to Kansas, because the voters would have been more like, well, okay, fine. Let those idiots pay for this. And now the idiots in Kansas, I'm just kidding, they're very fine people, they are willing to do something that might be regarded as idiotic, giving billions to a couple of sports teams in order to take them away from Missouri. And look, the national mood is against using taxpayer money for these projects, especially as it relates to NFL teams. The value of franchises continues to skyrocket. It's very fair and appropriate and not uncommon for states and local governments to say to NFL owners, pay for your own damn stadium. You don't need our money. We need our money. We have citizens who need that money. They don't derive anything from being able to say, we have a football stadium. We have an NFL team. We're a world-class major league city. They got bigger issues. And I think that's one of the big reasons why you aren't seeing states and municipalities rushing to throw money at teams. Now they're doing it in Jacksonville. That's coming up next week, whether or not the city council will approve the deal struck between the mayor and the Jaguars. But anytime it's put on a ballot, fans are going to say no. Voters are going to say no. The fans might say yes, but the voters in any city outweigh the fans. That's just the reality. For as big of a deal as we think the NFL is, in most NFL cities, most people don't care. In some, they do. In some, everywhere you go, you're going to find most people are fans of the team, especially when they're doing well and people are jumping on the bandwagon. But even then, most of those people are going to say, we're still not paying for your stadium. So, good news for the Chiefs. They've got Kansas already passing in one of their two legislative chambers a bill that would pay for a new stadium. And now Missouri. What are you going to do, Missouri? And then maybe Kansas and Missouri get into a tug of war for the Chiefs. The Chiefs sit back and they win, and they never have to threaten to leave the area. That's the best case scenario for any team that is trying to leverage a taxpayer-funded stadium deal. If you are in a spot where you've got multiple states that can compete and will compete to host the team, you win if you can get them to compete. That's what the Commanders have been trying to do for a while. You've got Virginia, you've got Maryland, you got DC. Ideally, you should be able to work something out where you get your best deal possible. Now, having Daniel Snyder as the owner was an impediment to that. We'll see if they can get it worked out with Josh Harris and company in charge. One of the things that would ostensibly make it harder to sell the Chiefs to Kansas, Missouri, or anywhere else is this rash of off-field crime that we've seen, or at least allegations of crime. Although, at least in one case, it clearly isn't an allegation because we've seen the video over and over again. The Rashee Rice street racing from late March, 8 felony charges, and he still hasn't been charged with felony leaving the scene of an accident involving injury, although there's clear video evidence of him leaving the scene. So 8 could become more than 8. Other allegations against Rice and one other player, Isaiah Buggs, are just allegations at this point. But the troubling details of the Isaiah Buggs arrest over the weekend for domestic violence / burglary, and he faces a second-degree burglary charge and a second-degree domestic violence charge. From the police documents, breaking into the mother of his child's apartment with a tire iron and dragging her down the stairs. Good Lord. And I can understand why the Chiefs haven't cut Rashee Rice, because they view him as an integral part of the team going forward. They regard him as a guy who figured out the offense even faster than Tyreek Hill. It's a complicated offense. Rice had nearly 1,000 yards during the regular season last year and was a key contributor in the postseason run that resulted in the second straight Super Bowl victory. Buggs is added to the practice squad in January. He's bounced around the league. He would seem to fall into the category of guy who gets made an example of. I say this all the time. Excuses are made for the stars. Examples are made of the scrubs. And maybe the Chiefs don't want to look hypocritical by running off Buggs while they have Rice. Usually you aren't actively involved in covering for a star at a time when you're politely or otherwise telling a scrub, get out of here, the stuff you did is unacceptable. Because if they would do that to Buggs, it just makes it more glaring that Rice is benefiting from the standard that we all know. We're numb to it. I'm not saying it's right, but it applies in every sport at every level. If you are good enough for the team to look the other way, the team will look the other way. Because if they would cut Rashee Rice, somebody would jump on him immediately. He'd go through waivers, but he would be claimed immediately by another team. And that would be where he gets his second chance. See, every team wants to be the team where a player who has had issues cashes in on his second chance. You don't want another Chris Carter, all he does is catch touchdowns, which was cover for this guy's got some issues that we no longer are willing to tolerate. We're going to get him to finally wake up by cutting him, and then he has a Hall of Fame career somewhere else. Teams prefer not to do that. I got some more to say about the Comeback Player of the Year award. And yesterday's change, the guidance that was provided by the AP for the first time ever. And I want to be accurate here as I recount this as to what the actual guidance is, because I think it's important that we're on the same page. Because I'm not sure at the end of the day that it changes anything when we look at the actual language. And I'm trying to talk slowly so I can load the page that has the quote. Here it is. The key language, the spirit of the AP Comeback Player of the Year award is to honor a player who has demonstrated resilience in the face of adversity by overcoming illness, physical injury, or other circumstances that led him to miss playing time the previous season. Now, when you first hear about that, it's like, okay, no more coming back from sucking, no more coming back from being the number 2 quarterback, for example. And it was the Geno Smith resurgence in Seattle in 2022 that propelled him to the Comeback Player of the Year award, that caused the initial effort to change the AP award. And I would presume that the Damar Hamlin not winning the award last year after coming back literally from the dead, and Joe Flacco getting it, I voted for Baker Mayfield under the previous standard, which was there is no standard. I thought Baker Mayfield deserved it because I didn't think Damar Hamlin played enough to count as the Comeback Player of the Year recipient. Under the old standard, Mayfield and Flacco, at first blush, don't apply. But as I'm starting to scratch on this a little bit, and I wrote something at PFT on Wednesday about the possibility that if you bet on Sam Darnold at 30-1, you might end up being upset because on the surface, he's not eligible. When you look at this, though, player who has demonstrated resilience in the face of adversity by overcoming illness, physical injury, or other circumstances that led him to miss playing time the previous season. So let's break that down. Let's lawyer this thing. Player who demonstrated resilience. That doesn't mean the player has to be great or that the player has become a Pro Bowler when he previously wasn't even playing because he wasn't in the starting lineup or whatever the case may be. It's just demonstrating resilience. Resilience, not great performance, not even taking more than, I think it was 17 snaps on defense last year, like DeMar Hamlin did. So demonstrated resilience in the face of adversity by overcoming illness, physical injury, or other circumstances that led him to miss playing time the previous season. This can still go a lot of different ways. Other circumstances that led him to miss playing time the previous season. Well, for Sam Darnold, let's say he, and I know that reasonable minds can differ and will differ on whether or not Sam Darnold is any good. But let's say that with Kevin O'Connell and a full off season to prepare, he holds off J.J. McCarthy. He's the starter. He takes full advantage of having Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and T.J. Hawkinson whenever he's healthy and ready to go, and Aaron Jones, and the Vikings end up surprising people and making the playoffs, and Darnold has 4,000 passing yards. Is that resilience in the face of adversity by overcoming illness, physical injury, or other circumstances that led him to miss playing time the previous season? Well, he didn't play last season because he was benched. He was number 2. He had an opportunity at one point after the 49ers lost to the Vikings on a Monday night and Brock Purdy was concussed, short week turnaround. Somehow Purdy got cleared to play. That would have been Sam Darnold against the Bengals. He didn't play last year. Other circumstances led him to miss playing time. You're not the starting quarterback. That counts as another circumstance. Here's a better example. Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson missed playing time last year due to other circumstances. Those circumstances are, even though the Broncos deny it, they wanted to put him in bubble wrap to prevent his 2025 injury guaranteed salary from becoming fully guaranteed, because if you've been injured the final 2 weeks of the season and unable to pass a physical before the injury guarantee becomes fully guaranteed, it would have become fully guaranteed. It was the way to protect the Broncos from having a fully guaranteed obligation to Wilson, not just this year, but next year. Does that count as other circumstances? Now, look at it this way. Let's say they hadn't benched him and he had just been bad last year. And he goes to Pittsburgh and he ends up being great. Well, he didn't miss playing time. So I guess that excludes it. See, that would be the only way that this rule knocks a guy out. If you play every game the prior year, you don't get benched and you just aren't good. And then the next year, you're good. You're better. That would be the one clear category where you're knocked out. If you miss any playing time whatsoever, the voters could find a way to wedge that missed playing time into the other circumstances beyond illness and injury and say, okay, you're the comeback player of the year. So I don't know how much it really changes things. The one specific bright line would be if you played every game last year and stunk, you can't win it this year. But how many guys play every game? Like Derek Carr. Let's say Derek Carr has 5,000 yard season this year. He missed some time last year. He didn't play every snap of every game. He was banged around a little bit. Does that count? You could wedge it into that if you wanted to. So I don't know how much this guidance really changes things. And I think the better way to go, and the AP tried to do this, would be to have comeback player of the year and most improved player. That would create the natural split. And why not do it? Why not add a second award? And it would give, from the standpoint of driving interest and getting action at the sports books, it would be fun to say, okay, let's find the guy, a running back who didn't do much his rookie year, but now he's going to be the guy in 2025 for his team, or 24. Got to get my years right. Don't want to wish him away. Don't have many left. A receiver who's in his third year and this is it, like George Pickens, this is it. Even though he had 1,100 receiving yards last year, if he has 1,800 and becomes a first-team All-Pro, he's most improved player, potentially. The AP has resisted doing that. I think that if you truly want the Spirit of the Comeback Player of the Year award to be reflected, the way to do it is to also have most improved player. Then anyone that would be inclined to wedge most improved player into Comeback Player of the Year category would have a place to go. Okay, we can do that. I can truly focus on someone who falls within the Spirit of the Comeback Player of the Year definition without being tempted to say, I want the guy who I think is the most improved player to get some recognition. Let's make him Comeback Player of the Year. I still don't know what that would have done for Joe Flacco in 2023. See, because he didn't play every game in 2022. You have to play every game the prior year and stink and be sufficiently better the next year that someone would say, that's the Comeback Player of the Year. Oh, wait, he didn't miss any playing time last year. And look, I'm not being critical. I'm trying to help kind of real time on the fly. Let's get this to where we want it to be. And I think the only way to get it to where they want it to be is to have two awards: Comeback Player of the Year and Most Improved Player. I still don't know what Joe Flacco would have been. I still don't know what category he would have fallen into. You still might have had people inclined to vote for him for Comeback Player of the Year. You still might have had people inclined to vote for Baker Mayfield as Comeback Player of the Year. I think he missed playing time. I don't think he started 17 games. No, he got benched for Sam Darnold at one point in Carolina in 2022. So he would have been eligible. He missed playing time due to other circumstances. So anyway, I like the fact that they're trying. But as one of the great series of all time, Breaking Bad, it was Mike Ehrmantraut who explained to Walter White, no half measures. This feels like a half measure. Let's go the rest of the way. Let's go the rest of the way, add most improved player, and I think that will cause me and the other 49 voters, and who knows, maybe they won't want me to be a voter because I'm being a little too transparent about this process, but I'm not saying anything that I shouldn't say. And I would sacrifice my vote before I'd sacrifice my ability to talk about the process. Because look, if these awards are going to be bet upon, if they're going to be a part of this broader legalized sports wagering landscape, it's something that, number one, people care about. Number two, it's something that requires transparency and full analysis and understanding of what's going on, what the limits are, what it means, et cetera. So that's all I have to say about that for now. AP, Comeback Player of the Year, Most Improved Player. Let's get on it. And to the extent the NFL has basically made the AP awards their official league awards, pick up the phone, 345, Roger, Troy, somebody, call the AP and say, you know what? We think it's a good idea to have Most Improved Player and Comeback Player. Then the Spirit of Comeback Player is respected, and you've got an avenue, an outlet for somebody who has come back from not being very good last year, and they're better this year. All right, 17 minutes left. I want to talk about the latest developments in the Sunday ticket trial. Because I said yesterday that the thing that may save the NFL is the law. And I thought the law would save the NFL at a higher level. The law might save the NFL right here and right now because the presiding judge isn't thrilled with the case that the plaintiffs are putting on. Now, I don't want to get too legal nerd here, but remember this. The case was initially dismissed, and it was dismissed by a different judge. She has since passed. That's why a different trial court judge is handling the case. But the case was initially dismissed at the request of the NFL. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals overturned the ruling, sent it back to the lower court for a trial. And in January, the presiding judge determined, in ruling on what's called a motion for summary judgment. And I may have mentioned this recently. Those get filed in almost every complicated case because the defendant wants to say, hey, judge, there's no reason for a trial. There's no issue that a jury needs to decide. Based upon the facts that are undisputed, apply the law and we win. Happens all the time. And for a variety of reasons. A lot of times the defendant doesn't expect to win, but what the defendant's trying to do is to force the plaintiff to put some cards on the table. Because to beat back a motion for summary judgment, the plaintiff's got to articulate why the case works, how the logic holds together. It's a great way to get a peek inside the hand of cards that the plaintiff is getting ready to eventually put on the table at trial. The judge denied the NFL's motion for summary judgment in the Sunday Ticket case. So the judge decided, hey, there's something there that a jury needs to decide. Now the judge is upset. And this happened, and it hasn't been explained very thoroughly in the reports I've seen out there. And I know, I could have shut down everything I'm doing and gone to Los Angeles and sat in the courtroom all day and written a story or two or three or four at the end of the day that gets into all the nooks and crannies of everything that happened. And part of me thinks maybe I should have done it, but the other part of me says, first of all, I don't want to go back to LA until I have to. And second, all due respect. And second, I got other stuff to do. I got to prioritize how I'm going to allocate my own time, my own personal resources for something that adds how much? I don't know, to the broader effort of what we're trying to do here. But against that background, I'll say this. The coverage has been lacking. And things aren't explained the way they should be. One thing that wasn't explained in the reporting I saw yesterday, because it creates the impression this all happened in front of the jury. It didn't. The jury's not in the room when the judge says to the plaintiff's lawyers, basically, your case stinks. Your case is weak. You've overcomplicated your case. I don't like your case. I might throw your case out. And I think that happens for a very simple reason. And this is a dynamic that I've experienced in the legal practice. Typically, it happens on the defense side. When you've got these firms, and what occurs is firms grow and are fueled by large firms, typically by having a bunch of corporate clients that are charged significant hourly rates. Cost-insensitive clients is what they told us at the first firm I worked for when I got out of law school. They want cost-insensitive clients, meaning we got a big problem. We don't care what it costs. We're not going to micromanage the bill and say, why did it take you a half hour to do this? Why did it take you 45 minutes to do that? Why did it take you 2 hours to do this? It should have taken 1 hour, not 2. They don't want to screw around with that. They just want to be able to submit the bill and have the client pay it. Cost insensitive. So these firms grow and they become massive. And you got a lot of colleagues in the firm. And when somebody goes to trial, it's a fairly big deal because most cases resolve before it goes to trial. So it's a big event at a larger firm when there's actually a trial happening. And what happens is when you're talking to the lawyers who aren't part of the trial and are fascinated by it because we all want to go to trial, but it doesn't happen very often. So, hey, Jim's in trial. Let's talk to Jim about his case. So what happens is you get other lawyers who start saying, oh, did you argue this? Oh, hey, did you argue that? Oh, did you do this? And the lawyer does not want to say, no, I didn't think of that. Or, oh, no, we decided not to. Oh, you should argue that. And you definitely don't want those questions when you lose. So defense lawyers tend to over-lawyer everything. And that plays to the benefit of the plaintiff who doesn't take the bait. And I think what happened here, and this is my estimation based upon finding whatever scraps I can via Twitter and Google searches and Google alerts and this article and that article. I think what happened in this case was the plaintiff's lawyers took the cheese and they allowed themselves to overcomplicate the case in response to the predictable efforts by the NFL's lawyers to overcomplicate the case. It's not a complicated case. And one of the points I made today regarding the testimony of Sean McManus, the former CBS Sports chairman, on the key points, when he's asked the key questions, hey, did you work with the NFL to come up with some sort of a side deal to ensure that Sunday Ticket is priced at a level where people won't buy it and they'll watch CBS free broadcasts of NFL games, even though they may not want to watch the game that's served up? He's not going to admit that. He's not going to admit that he's aware of some effort by the NFL to fix the price to protect CBS and Fox. You don't have to hammer it 20 different ways to put the ammunition out there. So when you get the closing argument, you can say to the jury, look, what do you expect them to say? What do you expect them to say? They're not going to admit it. Gets to what I was talking about yesterday. If you watch yesterday's show, first of all, thank you. If I did, second of all, you may remember, as it relates to Jim Trotter, I said in employment cases, they never admit that they fired somebody for discriminatory or retaliatory reasons. They have an official story and they're sticking to it. And there's this issue of individualized perjury versus institutional perjury. And is it really perjury? I don't know what it is, but it is, we have our story and we're sticking to it. And the story is, we have no power over what Sunday Ticket costs, and there's no side deal with CBS or Fox. Every time CBS and Fox in these negotiations expresses concern about Sunday Ticket, and at the end of the day, there's nothing in the agreement that requires the NFL to keep Sunday Ticket at a certain price, but Sunday Ticket is still kept at a certain price. Oh, but there's no side deal. Now, maybe there was no need for a side deal. Maybe the side deal is implied. Maybe people who are smart enough to understand what CBS and Fox were looking for understand, okay, we got to make sure this thing is a certain price because we don't want to piss CBS and Fox off here and cut into their ratings. Or maybe there was a side deal that no one's going to admit to. Haven't we all had, at some point in our lives, a conversation that never happened? Someone will say something to us and say, this conversation never happened. And it's usually about stupid little gossipy things, but sometimes it's about important things. Wink, wink, nod, nod, this conversation never happened. Hey, off the record, way off the record, off the record, deep, deep undercover. Here's what I need, but I never said it. When you make that social compact with someone else under whatever you call it, let's just call it, this conversation never happened. When you come to that agreement, you take an oath. So which oath do you honor when it's time to testify? Do you honor the this conversation never happened oath? Or do you honor the oath to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? And haven't we seen TV shows and movies where you have people who are in that conflict in different settings, but you've kind of already given your word that this conversation never happened. And if you are ever known in your social circles and business contacts as somebody who can't be trusted, you're worthless. So anyway, I don't know what happened here, but it seems to me that the reason the judge is upset with the plaintiff's case is they have grossly overcomplicated, because I think all you have to do, get enough evidence in so you can go to the jury and say, look, you heard Beth Wilkinson in her opening statement say, this case is about choice, and we also want to have the biggest possible audience watching NFL games on free TV. Both of those things can't be true. Both can't be true, because if they wanted maximum choice, Sunday Ticket would be cheap. If they want to protect CBS and Fox broadcasts on free over-the-air channels, Sunday Ticket would be expensive. What is Sunday Ticket? It's expensive. Therefore, they had something going on to ensure that it's expensive. Why would they want to infringe upon your choices? Why would they want to make it too expensive for you to buy it? Why would they sell Sunday Ticket as displaced Packers fans in Pittsburgh can watch Green Bay games and force them to buy the entire season of all teams if they didn't want people to say, shit, I can't afford that. I'll just watch the Steelers games. So that may be what happened. And that was one of the big challenges. And when I was getting ready to try cases, I would always look at, what do I need so I can go to the jury and say, here's what happened. And there are certain facts you have to get in, and you don't have to get them in 50 different ways. Just get them in one way. Try to get them in an effective way, and then you can remind the jury of it, or show the document, or play back a snippet of testimony if they allow that. Depends upon the court. That's the way to do it. And I think the plaintiff's lawyers, because the NFL, as defendants usually do, has overcomplicated the case. I think the plaintiff's lawyers have overcomplicated what should have been a very simple case, and it could end up being fatal. Now, one last thing. I think the threat to throw out the case is a hollow one, because at this point, you just let the jury decide it. And if the jury finds in favor of the NFL, you don't have to get involved if you're the judge. Now, what could happen is there could be a verdict against the NFL. It'll make headlines. And then the judge at some point later will say, I'm entering judgment for the NFL, notwithstanding the verdict. That could happen. I think this was more than anything else a warning shot at the plaintiffs to move this thing along, quit dragging your feet, quit complicating the case. It's simpler than it needs to be. And I think that the plaintiff's lawyers would be wise to heed that and move the case along. All right. I have about 6 minutes to answer your questions. I'm sorry I didn't leave enough time. Which cities are the next that are in danger of losing? Not saying they definitely will lose their teams. That comes from CJ Newman. Well, Kansas City, depending upon what happens with Kansas, Missouri, or someone else. Charlotte, the city council there taking up next week the request for $650 million in upgrades to Bank of America Stadium. I think David Tepper, if he doesn't get what he wants, what's he going to do? Is he going to throw a drink on somebody? He's going to move his team. Maybe both. Maybe both. Oh, and take someone's hat off. The Jaguars, assuming Jacksonville City Council signs off on the deal that was reached between the mayor and the team, they'll stay in Jacksonville. Now, there was one issue that came up recently. The city council doesn't like how many foreign games the Jaguars can host, because that's fewer games that get played in Jacksonville. That could be an issue in all of this. Beyond that, there really isn't another current, we got to watch this. There may be a problem. Team wants a new stadium, and we don't know what's going to happen. Cleveland would be a potential one to keep an eye on. But I think that's more about, do they do something with their current stadium, or do they move to the suburbs? Chicago, same deal. It would be relocation in the same area, not moving to a different city, different state, change your name to the Austin Bears or whatever the case may be. So I think that catches all of the ones that currently are in potential hotspots. Molly Stadewasser, if the Dolphins underperform again this year, is Mike McDaniel on the hot seat? You know, they've been to the playoffs 2 straight years, but they've lost in the first round both times. I feel like it's starting to get a little uncomfortable. And I feel like Stephen Ross, who is getting deeper into his 80s, if he wants to win a Super Bowl in his lifetime, you need something a little bit more. And I don't know whether that's quarterback or coach. Quarterback or coach. Something I think is going to give after this year if the Dolphins don't get farther in the wild card round of the playoffs. And that may be one of the reasons why they resist signing Tua Tagovailoa to the kind of long-term deal he's looking for. Let's see what happens after this year and make decisions accordingly. So I think it's an important year. Might not be hot seat year, but it's an important year. And maybe next year is a hot seat year for Mike McDaniel, maybe even Chris Greer in Miami. What else do we have here? Samuel, with the report that Hassan Reddick allegedly lied to the Jets about his willingness to be available at the offseason program prior to the trade, do you see a scenario where the Jets demand that the Eagles modify the trade terms further or penalize Reddick beyond fines? No, there's nothing they can do. Look, this was the excuse that the Jets put out there because they looked foolish for trading for Hassan Reddick when he wanted a new contract from the Eagles. He didn't get one from the Jets, and what a surprise, he doesn't show up for the offseason program. They put out, I believe, the idea that we had an understanding with Reddick, and he was okay with it, and now he isn't. Those understandings are never enforceable. There isn't anything they can do. They can't void the trade. They can't punish Reddick. Shame on them for taking his word for it, because when you take the word for anything like this, there's a chance that the word is not going to be on it. There's also a chance that Reddick would say, I never agreed to that. You misinterpreted me, or it's just a flat out fabrication aimed at making the Jets not look foolish for trading for Hassan Reddick without giving him a new contract at the moment they did the trade. One more very important question before I go. And again, if I didn't get to your questions today, keep asking them, and I'll try to get to them in future episodes of PFT PM, tentatively next one tomorrow. Paul Dobson, on a scale of 1 to 10, how stoned is Chris Sims right now? I don't think he day smokes. I don't think he wakes and bakes. I'd say at noon, it's probably a 3 because he's probably got some left from last night. I'll say 3. I'll have to text him and see. I will text him. I'll report back tomorrow. I'm going to text him at some point today. I'll try to do it right now. I'll get this other interview that's starting momentarily. I'll find out. Scale of 1 to 10. How stoned are you right now? I'll try to remember to provide that very important update tomorrow. Thanks as always for some of your time. This has been PFT PM. The goal is to do it every weekday while PFT Live is on break. That goal may or may not be satisfied. Tomorrow, let's be back here, and we'll try to keep the streak alive. 3 for 3 so far. We'll go for 4 for 4. Thanks again. See you tomorrow. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.